Jealous.
It's like floor to ceiling in their apartment. It's amazing.
Here we go, guys. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just give it a couple more minutes. Paul, as I start, will you let anyone in?
Yeah,
Awesome.
I will. I will handle that.
I appreciate it.
Except for Jeff Lyons. I don't want that guy on.
All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good evening, and welcome to the last session of day 2 of the New York State Craft Brewers Conference sponsored by DWS. Before we begin, I want to mention a few housekeeping rules. First, please make sure you sign the attendee sign-in sheet. I just put the link in chat. Second, I'll be posting a lot of links throughout this session. If you feel like you've missed anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via email or chat. I'd be happy to send anything along. And third, this session will be a roundtable discussion. So your thoughts, opinion, wisdom, and questions are highly appreciated. Please feel free to put any of those in chat or raise your hand, and we'll be happy to call on you. Or if you just can't wait and you have something you want to say, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and say it. With all that said, I'd like to welcome you to Celebrating Women in the Industry, sponsored by Marathon Energy. In this roundtable discussion, we will be focused on different topics to improve awareness, educate, and celebrate women in this industry. Furthermore, this session is a perfect example of how breweries can be leaders in a changing social awareness for the better. With this discussion, 4 topics will be discussed and will be open to any types of questions, thoughts, or opinions. Let's go ahead and meet our presenters. I'm excited about this part. So first, I'd like you to introduce Erika Anderson from Unified Beer Works. Erika started her career as a computer programmer for a database management industry. Over 20 years, she worked her way up to department lead. Erika handles tasks such as team and project management, HR, strategic development, and budgeting, which all lend a hand in providing an experience of how she runs a business. Erika is a self-taught brewer, starting from the ground up as a home brewer, and now works side by side her husband, Jeff, to handle recipe development, brewing, and production scheduling. Additionally, Erika handles accounting, some social media management, and whatever else pops up from washing kegs, bartending, and cleaning bathrooms. Thank you, Erika. Welcome.
Thank you.
Second, I'd like to introduce Ann Reilly, Executive Director of the New York City Brewers Guild. Within her job, Ann advocates on behalf of all New York City breweries. Prior to this role, she handled events and promotions for 5 Boroughs Brewing, coming aboard to help make a big splash when they opened back in the summer of 2017. Before having an official role in the beer industry, Ann did a lot of freelancing and consulting within beer and marketing world. With a passion for the craft beer industry and an unremarkable talent for marketing, Ann created an Instagram account, which you may be familiar with, that helped her become a fierce advocate for local breweries and supporting the New York City beer scene. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
And third, Mary Izett, co-owner and multitasker of Fifth Hammer Brewing in New York City. She is the author of Speeding Brewing, Techniques and Recipes for Fast Fermenting Beers, Ciders, Meads, and more. Mary is a BJCP National Ranked Beer Judge, co-hosted, Mary, you might have to help me with this one.
Comment about it.
Thank you. A weekly podcast on all things fermentable, and has written Ale Street News, all about beer. Thank you, Mary, and welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We're excited. All right, let's get into our first topic. So our first topic that we'll be discussing is building awareness, females in the craft beer industry. I'm going to go ahead and let Ann start with this one, and then from there, you ladies just pop in.
Sure. I think one of the things that regularly comes up in a number of arenas is here in the city, we created a group called New York City Women in Beer with the intention of it being an umbrella group where women who are Pink Boots members, are Barley's Angels members, maybe home brewers or just, enthusiasts looking to get into beer. It was an open space where women with any kind of interest in beer could join, and it's become really, really active in the last number of years. We started with, Instagram and Facebook, and now we have a super active Slack, and it serves a multitude of purposes, not just information in the beer world, sharing job postings, but like we have, self-help channel or, self-care channels. And we also do, inclusivity awareness. Like it runs the gamut, and it's become a wonderful resource.
Awesome, thank you. Erika, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, sure. I think that, women are, we're starting to be a lot more recognized in the industry, which is wonderful. And I think doing things like this are huge. In our area of New York State, I know that there's a lot of activity for women down in New York City, as Anne was just talking about. And in the capital region, I would like to see some more activity up here. So one of my goals is definitely to start getting that brewing a bit more up here, which would be wonderful. But yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Mary?
I think that's both of what you guys talked about is great. I think our Women in Beer Slack, particularly during the pandemic, because we don't run into each other. We don't see most of the people that we used to see. We just see the same people every day. I go to the brew every day, but not everybody does, especially if you were furloughed and you are looking for another brewing industry job. It's really great to have our Slack group and the other online groups, so you can still maintain connections and also make more connections as well. That's one thing that is sadly lacking in this pandemic is networking, in person especially, but at all. And I think it's great just to have a general support group kind of for not only for what we're dealing with every day in the brewing industry, but also just in, dealing with pandemic related issues or whatever. So that's one thing that I think has been super good, especially with the pandemic, is having this great support group that is 24/7 available to all of us online. And I think, going forward, once we get back to more normal times, so Anne and I were leading the Pink Boots Society chapter here in New York City. It's neither of us has had time during the pandemic. And since New York City has never reopened fully at any point in time in almost a year, it just wasn't, most of us are just too bogged down running our businesses or doing our jobs or whatever we're doing during this pandemic. But I think that, we're all looking forward to having more kind of in-person events. Anne and I both participated in, I apologize. I'm just going to say I strained my upper back a couple of days ago, and I'm not quite myself. So I'm going to rely on Anne to help me fill in the blanks right now.
But I got Women's Beer Days.
Yes, Women's Beer Days, and also the Women's Beer Week that Hop Culture did. We had a giant festival, and that was super cool because we did a lot of events like panels in real life, all kinds of activities, bottle shares, and that was a really cool opportunity for us to really reach out to not only women in the industry, but women that are just interested in craft beer, or whether they're just love it and would like to meet other women or other people in general that would like to, that enjoy the same thing, or whether they want to get into the industry. Because that's one of the kind of the bars, not only for women, but guys as well, is how to break into the industry. Especially if you're new to your area, if you have just moved to the city, or you're just trying to get some experience under your belt. So I think those kind of events that happened in the past were great for not only as a great support group, but also as a way for a lot of us to welcome other women into the industry, but into our community at large.
Thank you, Mary. Question for you guys. So when building awareness, what type of support you think is needed to, not just from, your company standpoint, but, you touched on festivals and the Pink Boots who help, help this, but what things can our industry be doing to help push this forward?
I think one of the most important things is that we need to reach out and welcome people into the community. That is one of the things that I don't always see. Like, even, thinking back at like random beer festivals, we're all so excited to see each other and catch up with all of our old friends that we kind of might forget that we actually, there's a lot of especially at beer festivals, right? There are oftentimes a lot of people, women, in particular, that really want a connection into the beer world, or they're more interested. Lots of people interested in learning about beer. That's why they've gotten tickets to that festival. They really want to talk to you, talk about beer. And I think having the events like I had mentioned with the with Hop Culture's Women in Beer Week, that was super important, because we had things like bottle shares, where we had things where people that were just getting into craft beer or wanting to move forward into craft beer. That was an opportunity for them to really meet people like us who are already established in the industry. So I think that's something super important. If you are in the industry, if you own a brewery, if you work in beer, always keep in mind that there's a lot of people that really want to talk to you and want to learn more, and don't, it's super important to be welcoming and do education and bring people into the community if they want to be there.
That's great. Anne, Erika, do you have anything to add to that?
I think stemming off of that, education is definitely huge in that. And it's education for other women that are looking to get into the industry, or are just looking for some camaraderie in the industry. Especially, like I said, here in the Capital Region, we don't really have a solid organized group of women that get together. And that actually was something that I really wanted to do pre-pandemic, but then that happened. And to your point earlier, we've all been so busy trying to keep our heads above water that it's been impossible to really pull that off. So definitely a goal for the coming months. But I think the other piece of education is for the rest of society, especially men. I would like to, I'm hoping that there's some guys on this particular session, because there's a lot of awareness that can happen from them. I know that certain things have been taught within society, and there's certain things that have just been learned as people go through their day to day, but it doesn't have to, it doesn't mean that thought process has to be that way. People can actually be educated and realize that, it's not just men that can do everything that happens within the brewing world, or with anything for that matter.
Anne, do you want to add anything? Oh, you're on mute, Anne.
Sorry, my radiator, I have an old radiator and it tends to get loud. No, both Erika and Mary had some great points for sure. And I think we definitely need to ensure that there is this sense of being welcome. And yeah, as you're both saying, regularly when we are at festivals, being more attuned to interacting with someone rather than just hoping for the best. We need to actively ensure that, the door is open, there's seats at the table, and there's a, handwritten invitation to join.
Agreed. I see quite a few ladies on here that work or own breweries, and I'm curious to hear from you guys. In your experience, have you done anything that helps celebrate women, or do you find it kind of a struggle in your day-to-day to get that type of respect or representation? Don, Lou.
Hey, this is Kristen.
Hey, Kristen.
Hey, Jen, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Hi, everyone. We actually did for 100 years of women's right to vote. We did a beer called Susan B's. which was Susan B. Anthony, and that was pretty cool. So yeah, we try to do those things that we can to kind of celebrate women doing awesome things that women do.
Thank you, Kristen. That's awesome. Hey, Don.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so we do a lot, as much as we can. We are part of the Pink Boots Society. We're part of Girls Pint Out. And we actually have a very active Girls Pint Out group and get together once a month, doing it a little bit virtually now. But there's upwards of 30 women that come out and look forward to it. And we try different beers. And I think just for me, it's all about giving them sort of a safe space to get to know craft beer. You don't want to go out and feel intimidated, to say the wrong thing, to not know it as much as somebody else. So just kind of giving everybody that level playing field. And I always say, like, the fact that you even like craft beer, you're light years ahead of a lot of people. So that's the best.
Thank you, Don. Anybody else want to add anything? Okay, awesome. We will.
Yeah, I will just real quick. I mean, it's been
Hello.
impossible. Hi, Jen. It's been impossible with COVID. Just we had so many ideas that were like, oh, that's a great idea. Maybe next year. We had really good success with the local Syracuse homebrewers came in, and I was surprised at how many women were in that group. And we had a really great night, and I think that was right before COVID. So they're welcome to come back, and I'm sure we'll come back around to that again next year, or hopefully later this summer. So it's been more than anything, it's been more challenging to try and just figure out a good way forward, to be more inclusive and to possibly do something with Pink Boots or something in that vein. It's as you all know, very hard to plan right now.
Yeah, definitely.
I think one thing I'm looking forward to on the other side of this, I mean, we're not there yet, but I feel like there's finally light at the end of the tunnel where, New York City just reopened their indoor. We just reopened our indoor like a week and a half ago. We're moving to 35% this Friday. So it feels a little different this time. I think also with the people that are coming to our brewery particularly, but I'm starting, I think, one of the things that I've been thinking about and really looking forward to is, oh man, when we can have people into our space, right? Or even this summer we have access to some, not at the brewery, but some outdoor spaces in the neighborhood, thinking how we can connect with people, especially after, a year of not having these connections. So I think now is a good time to really, even if we don't know when that's going to be, this is a great time to start planning some of these events and some of the activities, and maybe even, making sure if you don't have an active virtual group like Girls Pint Out, we have a pretty new Girls Pint Out, and they are active, but I think, now's the time to kind of maybe start connecting with those groups, or starting those groups, or reaching out to people, so that eventually we'll have some great events that we can look forward to and meet new people and educate, and bring more people into this wonderful community that we all exist in.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, one of the many, many hurdles we've all faced during this is the fact that we had so much momentum going into the pandemic, especially for like Women in Beers events. Like last year, for instance, New York City Beer Week rolled directly into March. It will again this year. But that led to a whole week of, Women in Beer events to, promote Women's Beer Month. Well, Women's Month, we can call it Women's Beer Month. But yeah, being able to garner back that momentum and, pick up where we left off. And hopefully that's something we can all do.
Awesome. We have a question from Ethan. Ethan, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure. I'll just to make it myself clear. So all I asked was, is the same disparity, and I think I know the answer, but is the same disparity also present in homebrewing? And I feel like yes, but maybe a little bit less. And if so, isn't that also a really good place to focus efforts? And that could be homebrewing of beer, or homebrewing of cider or mead or whatever, right? But like just home craft making. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes. Go ahead.
There's definitely that disparity. I mean, there's way less, at least I started homebrewing in 2006, and I was the only woman in my BJCP class, for instance. Definitely, there are more women in homebrewing now, at least in New York City, but it's definitely still the minority. We're pretty lucky in that we have a couple homebrewing groups that are led or have officers that are female. So it's pretty, I think women feel pretty good about joining a lot of the homebrewing organizations, but I definitely think that's something that all of us can do as brewers. I know that from us, because we came from homebrewing at Fifth Hammer, we host homebrewing type events that are directly targeted, that are designed for homebrewers. We did it at New York City Craft Beer Week, and we'll definitely start doing that again. And that's an easy thing for all of us to do as breweries. There's a zillion events besides, inviting people to brew a beer with you, but also doing, bottle shares, or obviously you have to follow all legal procedures, but other kinds of homebrew oriented events that can be focused more on women, or just designed to make everybody feel welcome, no matter your gender or that you identify with, or whatever, to make everybody feel welcome. And I think that homebrewing is definitely a space where it's still very dominated by white men, and that is definitely an area a lot of us came from homebrewing, right? So that's definitely an area that we could work on for sure. Anyway, that's my in my experience.
Does anybody want to add to that?
I will say that when I was doing a lot of home brewing, every time that I went in to shop for ingredients at my local homebrew store, the owners, always men, up here anyway, they were always super respectful and super helpful, and they looked at me like, "Are you a unicorn? You're a female? What? This exists? Like, that's so cool. That's so badass." I'm like, I just brew. Like, no big deal. But so I think the avenues are there, and everybody that I have met in the home brewing community is super supportive, and they treat everyone like an equal, and they really do welcome everybody, because we're all beer geeks at the heart of it, and we just want to talk about beer and nerd out and whatever. And I think that's why it's a good community to really feel warm and welcome, and just talk about something you're super passionate about, and it could be male or female, which is great. So yeah.
Thank you, Erika. Anybody else want to add to that?
I'll go. Erika, I agree with you. I've been in the industry 5 years. I've worked in dozens of different industries over the course of my 30-year career, and this is definitely the most welcoming. Never once among our community of brewers and enthusiasts have I felt kind of gender targeted. I don't feel that way, though, sometimes when dealing with the support system of our industry, sometimes the allied side of things, the companies that want to do business with the New York State Brewers. And then certainly in the greater community at large, there's, when I show up at parties with some really good beer, and they turn to my husband and say, "Oh, thanks for bringing the beer." I'm like, he doesn't know anything about this stuff. So just kind of taking that positive point that you made that I totally agree with, and turning it into more of a question too, is how do we as an industry educate men to actively support bringing up women in this industry, right? Because like we know once you're in, Erika and I are saying the same thing, like we have a positive experience, but when you're on the outside looking at like, what are we doing to recruit women specifically? And this goes back to what Dr. J was talking about in her welcome, right? What are we actively doing to try to promote women? What are we actively doing to bring women into the brewery and to market to women? And what are we doing to to educate men to support the women?
Good question. And I think honestly, it starts from other men within the industry, within our industry.
Mhm.
You know, I know that when certain vendors will walk into our brewery looking to sell us on something, or even just to come in and we call them to look at a piece of equipment or do something of that nature. And I might be the one that comes to the door because I'm there brewing or whatever. And they're like, oh, yeah, is the owner here? And I'll be like, well, I'm one of them. What can I help you with? And I try to be as, positive with that as possible. I'll fully admit that I always get that little piece of me inside of like, come on, man. Get with
Yeah,
the
I
program.
know that feeling. We all do on this call,
Oh,
I
yeah,
think.
absolutely. But I will say, my husband, for example, he's really good at educating and making sure that people know, oh yeah, no, she does all the business stuff. She brews, she lifts heavy things, she gets dirty, she swears like a truck driver. I mean, and she knows how to handle all the different vendors and ask for, this, that, and the other, and talk shop. So I think that's definitely a big part of it. We need the men in our industry to help us, to help give us that platform and really help educate other men within the industry on how much we can do and how much we are doing.
Yeah, agreed, Erika. I had a similar conversation. This is going back a number of years with Gabe Barry in her time at Brooklyn Brewery, and she made the statement. She's like, "We need the men to stick up for us." She's like, "I know that sounds like I'm on the second grade playground, but I guess a better way or a different way to verbalize that would be very often in countless situations. I mean, we've even seen it in vice presidential debates. Women get spoken over. And if there's a situation where there's another man in the room who can interject and point out that woman is being spoken over, maybe that's one way out of dozens that can make small changes with some kind of an impact.
Also, dude, if somebody does that to you, call them out. Like, shame them. I mean, I don't put up with crap anymore because I just like,
Right.
we have no time for this. Like, if an electrician walks in and they can't, and I'm the one who's fixing the switch or whatever, then like, just call them out. And a lot of times, actually, does pretty good. Like, it works very effectively. But that goes the same way. Like, if you see somebody not treating another woman right, whether that woman is a consumer or in the industry, dude, call that guy out. Like, don't put up with that anymore. It's not, no, we cannot put up with that anymore.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I will say too, it's when I talk about the whole education piece, I will admit that I think it did take some education from myself to my husband, as far as, okay, well, so it's my experience. He didn't realize it because he doesn't have those issues. Right? So he doesn't understand that, oh, people just don't talk to me the same way. They don't look at me the same way. They don't respect my opinion the same way. And certain things that might happen, I'll see some branding from a brewery that is unbelievably sexist, and I'll want to say something about it. Now, this is years ago, and he might be discouraging me from doing that. But when I explain why that's a problem, then he understands it. So I think it's, we really need to dig deep and make sure that the men in our lives fully understand why these things are a problem.
I think that's a
then
great...
they can.
Oh, sorry, Erika. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, I think that's a great segue into the next topic, which is sexism in beer, sounding the alarm. I think you kind of just touched on it, you know, whether it be marketing or promotion or just personal experiences that happened throughout women in their careers. What steps do we take, or you know, can and help others to take to be aware of these issues? Mary, do you want to go ahead?
Thinking how to answer how.
It's a loaded question.
Yeah, I mean, that has a lot of layers, right? Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, education is definitely key. And you know, I have to go back, but like, I think speaking out is for sure. Like, you cannot stay silent. That is not an option anymore. Whether that means like, hey, you know, you just said what you know, whatever. If you are spoken to in a way that is not appropriate or that you don't feel comfortable with, that person might not actually know it, right? I mean, whether it's a guy or a girl or whoever, right? So I think, you know, making sure, and you know, you don't have to be rude, but making sure that we're all talking about, there should be no elephant in the room, right? You have to talk about it. You have to stand up and speak up when it happens. And so we all, you know, people need to know that there are just, that sexism and misogyny is not okay anymore.
I worked for a brewery at the beginning of my career, and our farmer, grain farmer who used to come pick up the spent grain, had this tendency to constantly touch my arms. And he'd be like, "Oh, you're so strong. You're so strong." And it made me super uncomfortable when I told my boss about it. You know, it was just like, well, that's just what happens. And I didn't have that type of support where it was like, okay, well, you know, we'll handle it. We'll talk to him. It was pretty much either you figure it out or deal with it. And that was quite a learning experience for me. I'm not necessarily someone that's very confident in just going up and saying, you know, don't effing touch me. You know, I'm always, you know, then I'm like, oh, they're going to think I'm mean, or, you know, I'm a bitch. And I know Erika, we talked kind of briefly about breaking those stereotypes. But what, you know, just what advice would you give any women facing those types of issues currently? You know, how to approach it if they're not necessarily comfortable?
I think every situation is different, but you're saying that is, I think having that, going back to our support systems, like having a support system, because obviously there are a lot of women in this industry that have we've seen some in the news, particularly lately, that have dealt with some incredibly horrendous and difficult situations. And there are situations where your job is threatened, right? Your livelihood is threatened, and that is never a good situation to be in. And that is very difficult to handle, and it takes a ton of strength. And sometimes it's too much for one person at one time, especially, you know, given, you know, there might be many multiple circumstances that you're in that are that's challenging to you. So I think having either finding that network, that support system, but then on the flip side of that, for all of us that are in good places, or that have position, you know, have a more like a position of power, right? Or a position where we have, we can make the rules, we can change the rules, we can set the rules, then making sure that we're providing a support system to other women. And also, and create, look, if there's not that space available, then it needs to be created. Because that is number one. Like, not everybody can go through all of these things alone, and having other people on your side to help you is key.
Absolutely agree with that. Yeah, like if you're in a situation, because there are so many places that are super small, like maybe there's only 5 people working there, and if one of those 5 people, if only one of those 5 is a woman, and she's experiencing that, and she isn't in a position that she can say something to her colleagues, being able to have a network, or, you know, someone that she trusts outside of her own space to go to for advice how to handle it, that is so needed. I mean, I've been in a situation a number of times with, a colleague who's asked how to handle something. I mean, I've also been in my own situations, one in particular where I had started very recently at a company, and a person who was a peer, not my boss, but, on the same level, started calling me, sweetheart or honey or something like that. I probably the second time he said it, I said to him, I will not be addressed like that. We work together. This is a professional environment. This isn't 1950. I won't be addressed by that like that. And I think it took him back that I was that forward. But it occurred to me, I'm setting the pace here. Like, if from day one I accept that, it's not going to get better. And I've also had situations with women in our community who've asked me how to handle something, and anytime that I can assist with that, I'm here for it. And I think, just as Mary was saying, making sure and helping to create networks where that can happen.
Erika, did you want to add anything?
I think it's wonderful that we are able to be in a position of power. The three of us women, or any other women that are within their organizations that are on this call, because it really does help provide a support system for other females that are actually within our organization. And I feel badly for organizations where, to your example, there might only be 5 people working there, and one of them is female, and something might happen and she doesn't feel comfortable going to her superior to discuss the situation because they're a male. So I think that there's, again, always going back to the education piece, but I think that's absolutely what Anne was saying. It makes it that much more important to have those organizations outside to make sure that females have that support system, and they feel like there's somebody they can go to, that they can talk to ask advice. What is the right thing to do here in this situation? And we have some females that work for us in the tap room, and
I think she froze up. Did she freeze up?
they completely.
You froze up for a little bit there, Erika.
Yeah, and the females in our tap room occasionally will be put into a bad situation, something inappropriate is said, and I've given them full power to reply back to them. That's not appropriate. Don't feel like you have to put up with that, because that's not cool. They wouldn't say that to the guy that's working behind the bar. They shouldn't say it to you. So,
Great.
yeah,
Ethan. Oops, sorry, Erika.
Go ahead.
Ethan, I think, had something, his hands raised. Go ahead, Ethan.
Well, it's perfect, because that's kind of what I was going to say too. In that kind of a situation, I prefer to empower the lady to respond, like appropriately or forcefully or however you feel best, and say, I got your back, rather than like go do that. It's teach a person to fish versus give them a fish concept, right? So if they're sort of like, I really don't feel comfortable with that, then okay, fine. But it makes me feel a little like I'm not really helping. I'm sort of it's a band-aid more than a solution, but I'll do it, sure, of course, right? I prefer to say, like, did you feel fine? Telling that person to fuck off. It's 100% okay. And when that happens, and if that comes back to me, trust me, I got you. Yeah.
Thank you, Ethan. I kind of want to highlight something John said from Strong Rope Brewing. I give you the chance, John, if you want to put something really good in chat. And I think a lot of people agree with it. Do you want to go ahead and speak upon that?
Sure. I'll just to reiterate, I mean, it's horrible what not only in our industry, but in many industries where women are telling us that they have to endure, and we kind of leave them hanging as the one to speak up when it happens, or, you know, we should also have the confidence to address it head on. And it's just even more clear to the offender that it, you know, that kind of thing isn't tolerated.
Yeah, that's an excellent point that you bring up too. When I mean, we don't get to hear those conversations that happen between men when it's just the guys, right? And do men, when they feel that something wrong is being said, do they have the confidence to speak up and say, hey man, that's not cool, and here's why that's a problem?
And it doesn't have to be in a demeaning way. You could kind of tease out the idea of what they're saying. It's like, oh, so do you, without getting specific. I mean, I think you understand, but you could address it very directly and plainly without being mean.
You know, and just kind of touching on what both of you guys said, and throwing kind of a different angle at it. There was a brewery, I'm not quite sure, a few years ago that came out with a beer, and the name and the promotion around it was very offensive to women, and it really upset some of our board members. And when it was brought to everyone's attention, I think there was kind of a mix of, oh my gosh, absolutely, to, oh, they're just playing around, it's don't be sensitive type of, you know, like they didn't see it right away. And just you know, thinking about that, and about what you just said, John, and being aware, how do you distinguish between the two? Like when is it a joke gone too far versus, oh, you know, playground talk, or, you know, whatever? Where is that line?
It's a difficult, there's no simple answer, but you know, in each circumstance, if there's if you could think, oh, if I was someone other than who I am, would I feel bad about hearing that? Would I, you know, take offense to this? Would this make me feel less than who I am?
And my other thought, and this would be for the, you know, all the ladies on here too, is, you know, if it's something that upsets you, you know, personally, is that all you need for other people to understand? Or do you feel like if there is something that's out there that upsets you, should you have an explanation why? And I hope I asked that question correctly, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, Anne, that I think this industry lends itself to a certain type of woman. I don't think the average woman in this industry is kind of shy or demure or sensitive or delicate. This is just a generalization I'm making, right? So I think in this industry, you know, we're kind of surrounding ourselves with women who are more likely to not be offended. Maybe we're women who spend most of our time around men, and we're just so used to being one of the guys, or kind of going along with it, and we're really not personally offended, but we get that the average woman is offended by something, and that's I think where that line is, Jen, which is completely blurry, right? It's definitely not black and white, because I don't think I'm a good test on it, because I've always I've always done sports, and I've always liked things that are more male oriented. So I don't think I'm a good gauge. I don't think maybe many of the women on this call are a good gauge, but you just have to think of the greater population of women. Like, is that marketing, or is that statement, or is that language, whatever? Like, in general, does that ruffle or make women feel uncomfortable who are not used to this industry, you know, not used to, you know, being around men? I think that's really, we have to look beyond ourselves, beyond our personal idea of whether or not we're offended and think about, would this offend my mom, my sister, my niece, my neighbor, that kind of thing.
You bring a really good point too, Megan, because I feel this. I always grew up with boys. Like all the people I hung up with my whole life were just guys. So you almost become desensitized, to what they're saying that could be seen as offensive, and probably is offensive, but you just don't notice it after a while. It becomes like white noise. So to be more aware of that. And
I feel like a lot of, because I've kind of, also become numb, especially to the stupid beer labels that are sexist or misogynist or just negative towards a group of people in general. But I think one thing to do is ask yourself, well, why did they do it like that? Like, where is this coming from? Because most of the time it's coming from trying to belittle or put somebody in a smaller space, right? You're trying to make somebody feel smaller or appear smaller or even harmful in some way. And that is not okay. That is never okay. So I feel like a lot of times we ask ourselves, well, why would that brewery do that? For instance, if they're looking at a can label, let me tell you, it's not for the good, it's not for lifting humans up, it's for bringing somebody down. And that's not cool. So.
Yeah, that makes me absolutely insane. When I see in this day and age, and there's a local brewery, it blows my mind. And they're still putting them out there. Those beers are still out on the shelves. And I'm like, how is this okay? How? Makes me nuts. My husband has been dying to say something.
As a guy, it blows my mind too, to be honest with you. And I think the whole thing really starts with.
I'm sorry, you froze right when you said a local brewery did. I'm curious what they did because I think we all missed it. So sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, a local brewery, they have a couple beers out with some, I consider them fairly offensive labels. They're sexist.
Incredibly sexist.
And I don't understand why it's okay. I don't understand why they keep putting it out there, and people have said stuff on social media pages and whatever, and it, I don't get it. I don't understand.
No.
But so what were you?
But no, all I wanted to say, and I've been listening to this whole thing as I've been prepping dinner, but it starts with the guys not being like that and trying to call out other people who are. Look, it's like someone had said earlier, I heard, like, it's not 1950s anymore. This isn't an episode of Mad Men. Like, everybody's equal. I don't care if you're man, woman, gay, straight, black, white, it doesn't mean shit to me. Everybody should be treated equal in this industry, and that's that. And if somebody's not, everybody else needs to step up and kind of, someone else had said it too, like, shame that person, like guilt them into maybe just reevaluating the way that they're looking at things, because it's clearly not in line with what today's society expects.
Yeah, it's perpetuating the bad.
So that's my sense. I'm going back to dinner. So.
Thanks, Jeff. I think that kind of goes, hand. We talked about building awareness and in celebrating women. Maybe as an industry, we need to come together and say enough's enough. Like, our industry is very, community oriented. We support one another. You can go into your neighboring breweries and hang out, and it's like a second home. Everybody supports everyone, for the most part. And, maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it takes the masses to be like, enough's enough. I don't know. Does anyone else have anything else they want to add to this? I'd love to hear from some men on here. We've been talking a lot. Jeff added some great points, but I'm just curious as to hear from a man's perspective. If you see this sexism, or it's just kind of subconscious, just another thing to you. Don't be shy. We don't bite. Anyone? Paul?
I just talked too much already.
No, never, Ethan.
Paul, I'm curious, not to put you on the spot, but I truly am putting you on the spot, about your role as the executive director of a team with all your staff, all three of us are women. And so I'm curious kind of what your experience is, and if there's things that we don't know that you've had to say or do to kind of defend us, or what your observations are working on a team where you are the minority.
Well, you guys are, and I'm not kissing up here because it's the truth, are three very strong women. Like you just are strong, smart women. And, I feel like you'd call me out if I did or said anything that was insensitive, which I probably have unconsciously as a middle-aged white male. Like it just, I'm not infallible by any stretch. I think I've learned the most, and this is where I have failed miserably in this job in a sense that, most of the executive directors in the country are women now. And so what I miss a lot is the travel to the CBCs and stuff where I would get together with them. And, I think, Ann, you might have been involved with them too. And hear all of the shit that happens, like that that happened maybe in front of me that totally went over my head that I should have been aware of. And, two instances, there are two executive directors that should remain nameless that have been removed and fired because of sexual misconduct with their employees. And one of them, I remember being out at a bar in Denver, and he said something to one of the female executive directors, and she threw the hammer down on him. And it was fine, and he deserved it. But the men said nothing. Right. That was where I failed. Like that's, we should have thrown the hammer down on him in support of that, because it happens more than we even see. But, I think this is, I don't know. I mean, the way I think of it is it's crazy to me that we're still talking about this, but I'm also, again, middle-aged white male, right? That, I don't, you guys, the crap that you guys do and see and hear, and I don't, why a woman brewer or a woman owner is a thing anymore. Like it shouldn't be a thing. It's so I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe I didn't answer your question. I don't know, but
and just to back that up too. Yeah, Paul, I absolutely agree with that. And yeah, if we could, I guess it's such an overused term, but normalize having other men call other men out for that kind of thing. Whereas one of the things that I've noticed, myself and Mary and I grew up in a time where, from a very young age, we were aware of how older men at a family setting, whatever, might look at you, and learning very early on. I mean, I know that I had to, from the age of before 16, learn how to manage when someone catcalls you. Do you address them? Do you ignore it? Like things like this. And the women who are younger than I am in this industry, I notice is they don't put up with any of that shit. They just right away, like Mary was saying, we're not putting up with it anymore. And yeah, it's okay, sure. I came up in a different time where you did have to put up with some shit, but it wasn't 1950, But yeah, I mean, I have friends and colleagues in this industry who are, under or right around 30, and they're not taking any of it. And it doesn't matter who's around. When shit goes down, they're going to call it out. And I think normalizing that across the board, not just women doing it, but anyone who sees something being done, call it out, as Mary said earlier.
Awesome. We only have about 7 or now just 6 more minutes before our session ends, but I would like kind of to touch on this. We heard about a little bit about it from Dr. J, and and I'd love to talk more about creating inclusivity, how your brewery or our brewery's environment and marketing can help females and other minorities feel more welcome and accepted as employees and customers. I'm sure everyone, faces different challenges. And I know Dr. J spoke upon that depending on where your brewery's at, but I'm just curious, like, what you guys, and I know you guys are working on stuff, but what types of things are you guys putting in place to combat that? And welcome.
Yeah, Jen, I guess I can quickly talk about some of the things that we're trying to do here in New York, here in the city, and have been for the past, started officially over a year ago, just going out of our way to make sure that we are reaching out to communities that either might not even know about craft beer, especially here in the city, ensuring that there is space for everyone, like going above and beyond. And, I feel like a little bit of a broken record. But yeah, just ensuring that people don't just feel welcome, but they feel invited.
Awesome. Erika, do you guys do anything in the Saratoga region?
So we have not had the opportunity to do anything yet, and that again was one of my pre-pandemic list items. But now that we're hopefully looking at that little tiny beam of light at the end of the tunnel here, that exactly what Ann is saying. I would like to reach out to some communities that are outside of Saratoga Springs, because I don't know if a lot of people are super familiar with what it's like up here, but it's extraordinarily white. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of education that can happen, because I think people live in their little suburbia bubbles here, and they don't pay attention to what's going on outside. So when all the things were happening on the news this year, they're like, wait, what? That's a thing? That's a problem? Yep, it is. It is. And it's a problem that they don't know about it. So that's something that I really want to work on within the surrounding communities that we have. And I mean, anybody can speak to this that is in the brewing industry. We have such an amazing platform to speak to these social issues and to try to help. I don't know that we can fix these issues. Fixing is not going to happen overnight, but we can help. We can help, we can educate, we can help bring some better days to those communities, because they deserve it. So yeah.
Awesome. Mary, do you want to add anything?
I think, this is something we talk about a lot. I'm part of a new not-for-profit that's working on a new paid internship for people of color. And it's difficult, especially, I think the most important thing is that you have to have, we all look in New York City. It's one of the most diverse places in the country, if not the planet. Mm-hmm. And we really need to have our brewery staff, back of house and front of house, reflect that diversity. And that is not the case right now. Certainly it's shifting. We're moving the dial a little bit. But I think about that all the time. I took over the tap room, or our beer counter, when the pandemic happened. And we've been running kind of skeleton staff with only to go for most of the time. And, that's something that we're starting to talk about, is when we're going to be ready to hire more people, and how do we make sure that reflects the city that we live in and the community that we exist in. And I think, the other thing is, especially front of house, right? Those are the people that your customers are going to interact with, and making sure that you are hiring the right people, and training them, and making sure that are welcoming to everyone, right? That's super important. Those people, your front of house is the face of your brewery, period, to the customer. And I think, a lot of things we could do, like I do our social media right now as well. And, I think definitely paying attention to how you are presenting yourself on social media to different groups of people, people from different, backgrounds or countries or whatever. These are all important. And it's hard, especially depending on your background and how much experience you've had with the world around you. So I think there's a lot more resources out there, and there are definitely ways to learn, for all of us to learn on how to be more welcoming and more inclusive and just, man, everybody should feel welcome in your tap room. So I think a lot of us, that's something I think about all the time. And I think starting with your front of house staff is really important, but it's also just how you present yourself in every way. So just, putting more thought into that, educating yourself, and widening the community that we're all living in. I mean, the more diverse that the people that we surround ourselves, the better. Period.
Mary, I love what you just said. I completely agree. I think, it all starts with a conversation, and we're finally all having that conversation. And I think, Erika, you said nothing's going to get fixed overnight, and it may never completely get fixed, but we can definitely make it better. I started in this industry over 10 years ago, and from the beginning to where we are now, things have changed so much, just for being a woman in the industry for the better. And I will say this about New York State and the craft brewing industry. Overall, it's been the majority of people have been extremely accepting of women in the industry, and for that I'm very grateful. And it just continues to build. That support continues to build, and although we're still having these conversations now, it gives me hope that, in 10 more years, this won't even be an issue that we have to talk about. So we are over time, but before we end, is there anything else anybody wants to add? Well, I thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Erika, so much for being a part of this session. We really appreciate it. Please remember for everybody on to subscribe to the NYSBA YouTube channel. We'll put that in chat. You can view any session that you might have missed. And we hope to see you guys tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.